All right, welcome to this series, an introduction to building data science applications with R and R Shiny, particularly for data scientists and data analysts that use R. Shiny is a very neat package that can help you build very interactive applications that allow you to visualize your data or your analysis a little bit more differently and also share some of that work with your teams, whether you're working with clients or you're working with teams internally or even for yourself. So I'm on the R Shiny webpage here and I'm just at the gallery section. I'm looking at some of the applications here. Let's take a look at this movie explorer. What you'll notice is that you have a few widgets here, some visualization in the ability to mix and match, change a few things, and you see also the visualization moving forward. It seems like I maybe scaled that a little bit differently. But the proposition for this really is if you program in R, you don't have to write any of the HTML, CSS, or JavaScript, or at least for the very basic, actually not basic, a little bit more than basic applications. But when you get to advanced applications, you may need to do that. So let's go ahead and just start coding on here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to power up RStudio, and while I'm doing this, there is a presumption here that there is some basic knowledge of programming in R, and not that much, but at least just a basic presumption that you have experience with writing code in R and using things like RStudio, for example. Right? If that's still a challenge, then I'd recommend maybe looking at some of the other introductory uh, series that I will upload, but this one does presume that you have some knowledge on using R. So I'm going to make a comment here. Let's see. Make a quick comment here, and I'm going to say building data science apps with R Shiny. Maybe we should date this as well. This is October 6th, I believe. All right, once we have that, I'm going to save this. And for me, it's just Command S. So I'm going to desktop. And I'm just going to call this R Shiny. That's it. And the first thing we need to do is to install the packages. The way I like to do it is creating a temporary variable here, and the first package we're going to install is Shiny, and the second is Shinydashboard. So just create a vector, and then I'm going to pass this vector to. Now I didn't need to do this, but it's just the way I like to do it. And as I'm going along here, I'm trying to make sure that I'm making this as accessible to everyone as possible. So you can run this by hitting this widget right here. And so as you run it, if you haven't installed the packages, it might take a little bit of time. But if you have, it might take just a moment to update the packages that you have. And so we can now begin by loading Shiny and Shinydashboard. So let's go ahead and call in the library Shiny here, and we do the same thing for Shiny Dashboard. As you can see, it's there. So let me maybe spend about a minute just talking about what these two are here to do. So Shiny contains the actual framework of having widgets, for example, that allow you to upload a CSV or upload some data file, and having other output widgets that allow you to render some things. So the bulk of our application is going to leverage these functions, but we'll quickly realize that building a good UI from the get-go, Shinydashboard provides a very good framework of cleanly separating your code and working on different parts of the code that work together eventually. And we'll start seeing this in a second. So the way we're going to think about our application is going to have 5 sections, or well, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, we're going to have 5 sections. So the first section is the header section, then we're going to have the sidebar section, then we're going to have the body section. We'll have the server function. So it's not a section, but it's a server function, and we're going to have our application which sort of ties in everything that we are doing here. So we're going to do pretty much the same thing for all of these sections. We're going to define a variable here, header, and we're going to call dashboard header for this. We're going to do the same thing for sidebar, like so. Now we're going to do the same thing for the body, and the reason we're doing this is so that our code is contained for all of these three sections, which you will see how they render in a moment. And then the server is going to be a function, and the way we define functions, obviously, in R is we use the keyword function, and whatever the code contained in the function is going to be there, and this is always going to take an input and an output. Okay, and this almost references what the user is going to experience, or what the user is, putting in as an input and what is going to receive as an output. You can think of it that way. And then finally we have the Shiny app function. And the Shiny app takes two arguments, UI, or at least the arguments that we're going to worry about, the UI, which is the page, right? The page that we need. So we go ahead and call the dashboard page function, which consists of the three things we've just defined above. In this case, it consists of the header. So we're just going to say header is equal to header. We're going to say it also has a sidebar. So we're going to say sidebar is equal to sidebar. And we also have the body. We're going to say body is equal to body. So that's the dashboard page. And then the second thing it takes is the server. And in this case, we're just going to pass in the server function that we defined above. So once you have saved this, you notice that there have been changes here on the widgets above where we had ran before. So go ahead and hit run application, and all of a sudden what we see is a UI that has come up, and we can extend this a little bit, and what we see is we have a widget that will close the sidebar and unclose it. So this is the header section we're talking about, the blue up top, sort of the dark sidebar we see here, and then the main body we see here. And all those three functions that we have defined above, we're basically going to write code specifically in those buckets so that we can update this user interface as we see fit. You could also open this in browser, like so, and you could have the same experience, and sometimes it might be smoother on the browser as well. So now that we have that, let's maybe make a few changes here. A few quick changes. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the header and maybe add a title. And we're just going to call this title Data Viz App. So the application we actually, maybe I should have talked about this at the very beginning. The application we're going to build will take in a CSV, a very famous CSV in data science, the iris dataset, which has species of color, of flowers and their different characteristics, and we're going to visualize those in some form of way. We're actually going to have like a correlation plot and a box plot and a scatter plot as well. So that's what we're going to name it, and we can reload the application here again, and we see that we have rendered the title there. Now let's, okay, the other thing that we can do now is we can go to the sidebar, and what we need to create on the sidebar is to generate a sidebar menu that will house how we're going to add our CSV, because the data input will be a CSV file. We want to make it as generic as possible so that you could have, it doesn't have to be an iris data set. It could be a different data set, so you can just upload that as a CSV. So in this case, to do this, we're going to say sidebar menu right there. Sidebar menu takes in several menu items. You can put in as many as you want. We're going to only have one menu item in this case. And so we add one menu item here. And the menu item takes a few arguments. The first is the text argument, which is sort of the title of this menu item. And in this case, we're gonna call it, let's call it file upload. The second argument it will take is an icon, and in this case we use the function icon with the ID upload. Okay, there's many different IDs that you could use. And then the input that really matters now is the file input icon. In fact, you could leave this blank. I don't think you should, because it definitely does add some things to your application, which you'll see in a second. So the file input is what is going to allow us to upload a CSV, and in this case, the first thing we need is an input ID, and we're going to call this CSV file. Is the input ID, and then we add a comma. We need a label for this, which is basically a set of instructions that we want the user to know. So in this case, please upload a CSV. CSV stands for comma separated values. And the last thing we're going to need here is just the accept. What kinds of files do we want to accept? So in this case, it's a vector, right? It's a list of file formats. So we want .csv, comma. We also want text /.csv. We could also want txt / comma separated values, and you can do it text /plain. So this should be enough. So I'm going to close some of these spaces that we have here, like so. Okay, perfect. Let's see, this last one closes with this last bracket closes the sidebar menu. So we're going to leave it at that. Okay, let's see what happens when we run our application now. So if we run our application, we see some changes on the sidebar menu there. And what we have is the file upload and the icon. And the idea is we can now browse and upload the data. Now, we don't have a data set yet, and that's what we're going to do in a second for this video. And then the next video, we're going to add a few things. But the idea is we should be able to upload a file. We have uploaded the file that is running this application. Right now it's not failing because that upload is not really, we're not checking whether it's uploading a CSV. We just provided the instructions that it should only accept CSV, but we need some form of evaluation in the server function to allow us to do that. So let's close this and generate the file that we need. So I don't want to have a link on this website to have the file, so let's just generate it here. And we can do that by, let's just code in the console. So we're gonna, let's call in the library datasets. Okay, and with datasets, we're just gonna call data iris. And that's gonna take some time to load, as you can see here on the top right. We have iris, let's say it's a promise, but it's loading so that it converts itself to a CSV, and then what we're going to do is just save that, and the way to save that is we're going to write to CSV. Oh, in fact, before we do that, we need to set the working directory. The reason we need to set that is because we want to save it where we have this file, and in my case it's I believe it's, let's see. Well, let's just do that. Desktop, and then after desktop, it was in rshiny, so it's on rshiny for me. Once I have that set, then I can now write to CSV. And what we do is we just want to make sure that we write the name as iris.csv, and the file we want to write is now this file iris that is now loaded with 150 observations here at the top right. And so we call iris, and what we want is raw names as false. The reason we want that is we don't want the indices for the rows to be part of columns. So let's write on this, and it's, what is this telling me? Oops. The length of the element. Interesting. Well, let's see what has happened here on rshiny. So it hasn't written. There's an error. Oh, okay. Let's see if we write to CSV, and we pass in the iris file, and then we give it the name iris.csv, and then we just specify that name is equal to false. Okay, it's just an issue of arguments. Then I think we should have started with the file argument, and I thought that it would picked up, but clearly that's not the case. Now we see it's saved here, and that's totally fine. So we can go ahead and test that this in fact does, that we have the file, we've run the application, well, we have to save it, so save and run, and now if we come to the upload, browse, we'll see that we have iris.csv, upload that, nothing still happens, again, it's accepted the file is loading, it's not evaluating anything, that's what we're going to do in the next section, okay?